let everyone know, we have had the pleasure of a conversation many times before, so this is the difficulty is trying to find new questions I haven't asked him. But anyway, there are lots that are out there, and there will be many that come from this morning. Bruce, it's a great pleasure to be able to talk to you. I want to start with a really hard question, if I may, given the subject matter and the audience today. Do you see yourself as a leader?
Yep, I do. I don't aspire to leadership, but I do see myself as a leader, I guess because it's been thrust upon me and I take it seriously, I guess.
You say it's been thrust upon you. Was it never your intention to be a leader then?
No. For example, I direct this National Cancer Research Centre for Asbestos Diseases, and when they set it up, which I got to admit, I sort of drove the process, I said, well, can you find somebody else to lead it? Because I don't really want to lead it. I mean, I'm not actually all that good at the sort of administration side of things. I'm more a visionary kind of person. Anyway, they said, no, you're going to have to do it. So, thrust upon me.
When you were at school, when you were growing up, when you were with mum and dad, when you were with the family, was it a case of watching how others were leading and kind of taking note in a small way? Or were you always one of those that backed off and just waited your moment?
Good question. I was probably more like a middle of the pack. I mean, I was pretty good at school, but I never, well actually to be honest, when it got to be selecting prefects for school, I was forbidden because I was such a bad boy. I used to get the cane all the time, and the teachers had a meeting and forbade me to be on the election list. So yeah, I mean, that's the opposite of good leadership probably. But there's reasons why I was mucking around. But no, I'm probably just middle of the pack as a rule. Like playing football and things, pretty much always just one of the players. Yeah.
Were there never any moments when you could see all your peers at school, at university, who were kind of not taking the initiative and you thought, I need to, because they're not?
Not really, but I used to do it quietly. I used to think, if I was in charge here, I would do it differently. But I just never stood up and took charge.
Right.
I think, people are driven by all sorts of things, but sometimes... I'm driven by meaning, I mean, I want my life to mean something. So issues of leadership it depends on if they fall on that pathway, then they become mine, but I have no aspirations to lead per se, whereas I know some people love the idea of being in charge.
Right, okay, so leadership to you, if we can just get that straight, is more about the vision, but you will get, presumably, everyone else to do the actions for you, but you're kind of up in the cockpit seeing where you're meant to be going, is that right?
Yep. I think there's different sorts of leaders, and I'm sure there's different sorts of leaders here. One of them is obviously the military style of leadership. You will do what I say because I'm the boss, and it's sort of the hierarchy, and that's definitely not my personality, which is what I was saying before. But visionary leadership or charisma or whatever is probably more what I do, although it can infuriate people as well. I'm sure some of you are a bit like that too, where you just have lots of vision and stuff and you just drive everyone nuts because they haven't finished doing what you just thought of last week, and now you've got a new idea, and you can be a little bit... I'm a bit...
Do you find it hard to sometimes communicate what's up here to the people that are hopefully going to do the implementing?
Absolutely, James. I mean, I think it's crystal clear. I've discussed this with my brother. My brother has a lot of characteristics similar to me, obviously. And we often have this problem that it's really clear to us, but not clear to anyone else, which probably means we're not doing a real good job of communicating it.
Right, okay, so leadership obviously does entail quite a lot of that communication part of it. If you fail in that respect, do you feel that you're potentially not being as powerful a leader and as an effective a leader as you possibly could be?
Good question. Do I feel like I've failed? Yeah, I probably do. I don't worry about it too much because I think people kind of expect it of me. That I will talk like that.
Yeah.
And then usually in a private conversation I'll say I didn't quite get what you were saying.
So that I just get that. I think I've had one of those conversations before. I'm not sure what Bruce meant by that, but we'll go with it. Trust him. There's a lot of trust that comes with leadership, and people will probably back you because you've got the credentials now. You've got the runs on the board. People will say, well, he succeeded here. I'm not quite sure where we're going with this, but let's just go with it.
Absolutely, that works.
Yeah.
So for just picking cancer research, the people say this experiment did or didn't work, or, oh, you know, bloody hell, this didn't work, or whatever, or this did, I can't work it out. I'm thinking about how this might cure cancer, but they're thinking about how they might get a chapter in their thesis or whatever. And they know that I'm going to lift the conversation into the big picture, and it actually gets them excited. But I'll tell you why I think they tolerate me. First of all, in the styles of leadership, I am not a military style leadership, so I don't run roughshod over any of them. I respect them, you know. Number two, I am someone who provides the vision, etc., and they know that it's going to lift their work to a higher plane. But also, there's this other model of leadership, which I know we've talked about, which is this model of servant leadership, which I think took root in the 70s or something, although it's an ancient concept. And, you know, they know that I am more interested in their success than mine. So if you discover something, James, and you're my PhD student or research assistant, I'll go to a meeting and I'll say, da-da-da-da-da-da, excellent work done by James Lush. It might have been my idea the whole time, you know, and I had to drive you to do it, but I'll say James Lush, whatever, and I'll get you to speak. I won't want to speak, and I'll sit in the background. And they know that I'm interested in them and as people, so they tolerate me. So I'm not a military style leader, I'm more the visionary leader, but I have learnt, you know, not my nature, but I've learned how to be a servant leader as well, and I think that's worked.
Why do you think it works?
I think, well, partly because you keep people. You keep good people, you know, like if you're doing this to good people, they just want to get out, you know, because their creativity initiative is being suppressed or they're not getting recognition. But someone like me who encourages it and then, you know, puts them on the pedestal, I think they feel honoured. And they know that I actually don't care about the fame and the glory. You know, I'll push them out to speak, and they understand that, and I think they stay. And then you end up with experienced teams of people who really being productive.
Most leaders probably enjoy the limelight. You know, maybe the majority enjoy being in that leadership position because it offers them all sorts of opportunities. They have to have an ego. You're sort of saying ego doesn't come into your leadership at all.
Maybe it's a different sort of ego. Like I said, I'm driven by meaning, and meaning always sounds nobler than being driven by money or power or fame. But it's just as addictive, and you know, I can be just as driven and selfish in my desire to make a difference. So, you know, it always sounds better, but it's probably just as selfish. What was your question again?
We were just talking about ego, exploring.
Oh, that's right. Ego. Yeah, no, I don't. Well, you know what I hate is people thinking more highly of me than they ought to. You know, like. You know, I do lots of things that look really noble, but they're probably, you know, I'm driven by the desire for meaning. I don't want people to think that I'm in some way some huge altruist, and, you know, my ego is just as involved. But my ego isn't involved in a look at me way. Even West Australian of the Year, etc. People say, oh, you know, you might have said it when you interviewed me too. I know you interviewed me before. Oh, you must be really excited. And the truth is, I'm not hugely excited by it. I mean, it's a means to an end to sort of achieve some goals, but, you know, it's really nice, but on an excitement scale, it's like this, because I get excited by my kids, my wife, my grandchildren, you know, my friends, just, you know, going out, working in a village somewhere, or PhD students making a difference.
Okay, but now you've touched on that accolade, let's just focus on that and how, whilst you may not get excited about it, it does do certain things for you. How can you use an accolade like that, almost like recognition, to enhance your leadership, to progress some of those great initiatives that you've got going?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I let myself be nominated, because it would potentially do that. So you just get more entree. I mean, probably I'm here today because I won it, so, you know, I can speak to you and tell you what we're doing. And the nomination for Western Australia of the Year was primarily around fathering, the Fathering Project, so that's given us a lot more airtime, if you like, and people have become much more aware of it. The nomination for Australian of the Year was actually about our medical research, although when I went east and ended up on all these TV shows, all they wanted to talk about was the Fathering Project, which of course is not surprising because everyone's got a dad or hasn't had one or whatever. But no, it's given a lot more profile to the work. Yep.
Do you think it's going to be something you can sustain now that you've had a year of riding on that wave?
I think so. There is a trailing effect. of these things that you do get invited to things, and UWA have used me extensively. And I've said to them, use me. I mean, they gave me my start. I'm a kid from a working class factory suburb who got to go to medical school, UWA, so I'm grateful to them. So I always say, use me whenever you want, and they have. Relentlessly, but you know, I love it.
Which is good. Did this drip of putting that issue out there is probably, I mean, I'm always advocating this in the business that we're running. You can't just expect, you know, people to see Bruce Robinson in some sort of form once. It's a case of repetition suddenly allows that message to get through. Do you feel, let's just using the Fathering Project as an example, do you feel that that is now getting more traction? More people are aware of those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a brilliant comment, because we've been doing the Fathering Project actually for, I think, 12 years, or maybe it's 10. And it was drip, 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 and we went out to lots of schools and talked to dads. But yeah, and you know, if you graphed it, it'd be like, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da, and then we got a bit of assistance, and then we had some corporates who have taken over, the board, taken over because I'm, to be honest, useless at that sort of thing. Well, I told you earlier on, administration cut me out of it, you know. And they have really turned it into something, and the West Australian of the Year Award has really driven that. And so it is amazing how it just sort of suddenly takes off. So, yeah.
With that though, with that leadership sort of idea, it is again, you may have this vision, but unless you keep dripping that vision out there, no one else can catch on. And that's perhaps something that you see some leaders fail at, because they say, well, we did it once, but you know, nothing happened. Would you say that's a learning?
Absolutely, and you know what, I think people who are visionary and creative get bored quickly, so they want to go on to something else, which means the thing isn't sustained. Sustainability of any vision is a good challenge. I mean, I think sustainability of anything isn't a human characteristic. You know, whether you're on a diet or whether you come to a leadership seminar and you learn all about how to be visionary, you know, all the things you do, you know, it's pretty easy for it to fade. So sustainability of what we learn, be it, you know, people quit smoking but then they relapse, etc. So having a vision and then sustaining it is a challenge for creative people. So I actually trying to make sure I stay on that path. But it has worked doing that. You're right. Yeah.
Let's look at how you were just saying that. You know, can we learn about leadership? You know, is it something, obviously, a program that you know is being promoted here that people can talk about and can learn from? What do you have to have in the first place in order to maximise? You know, if you're a seed going to the right soil and the right people are around you, you can grow into a great leader or not?
I don't think necessarily. I have a slightly different view. Leadership is often about change. If you take over something as a leader, it's because, you know, there's something you need to do. And I think change is one of the fundamental difficulties of every human being. So we teach, so a corporation has to change, whatever the corporation is, a school, you know, a church or anything, you know, it has to change. And we teach medical students what we call SOC theory. So it's a fundamental theory because it overcomes the human inability to change. So, for example, let's say you're a cigarette smoker and you come to see me. This is SOC theory. SOC stands for S, O, C and K. S means you got a C, you got a problem, S. Otherwise, statistics, they all bloody lie. The smoking doesn't do any damage. O is you got to own it. If only my wife didn't nag me, or my boss didn't nag me, I wouldn't have to smoke, right? You got to own the responsibility. C, you got to change. Throw your cigarettes in the bin. And K, which is what you just said, keep at it. Sustainability. Human beings fail at one of those four things, and corporations fail at one of those four things. So you have to be willing to do all four things or nothing's going to happen. Diets, you know, you have to get on the scales to see that you're overweight and stop lying to yourself. You have to own the responsibility. You have to do something, go on a diet. But keeping at it, hey, that's the problem. New Year's resolution. Who can keep their New Year's resolutions? So as a leader, you have to be someone who's willing to do SOC. And I see it as a fundamental difficulty for all human beings, whether they're an individual or whether they are a collective. And medical students, you know, they learn it straight away. It's so important for GPs to be able to see where a patient is blocked in their ability to do things. Or maybe they're getting angry with their kids all the time. They've got to see it and they've got to sock it. I've used that in my leadership at work. Being willing to see. The first thing, James, is being willing to take feedback. You know, nothing's going to change if I am not willing to get honest feedback from the people I work with. So I would fail at the first hurdle if I don't know, who here reckons they're really good at getting feedback from people who, you know...
Honest feedback.
Put your hand up if you've invited and get honest feedback about your performance. Yeah, so about 10%. Honestly, that's the first step in SOC, and if you're failing at the first step, nothing else can happen.
Learning in leadership. You know, you've been leading the pack for quite some time. Are you still learning? Are you still changing, adapting, growing?
Oh, absolutely, James. I'm like a sponge for learning. You know, I went out for dinner with a couple of mates the other day, and I realised something, and I actually had a meeting with someone else, and I realised the same thing. They have no EQ. They have no sort of ability to learn. They're not interested in learning. I'm the sort of person where if you and I are talking over a coffee and you say, I read something interesting about leadership or anything, SOC, for example, I'd say, oh, it's fantastic. Oh, I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to work out how that applies to me. And in fact, the challenge earlier on was to say, how does all this apply to you? I'm like that, you know. My wife, Jackie's like that too. But I've noticed some people have a brick wall, you know. They find something they don't quite understand, like emotional intelligence. They read, and they won't read about it, they won't learn. The 5 love languages, you know, how people speak love. They won't engage. They say, oh, it's got to be BS, you know. And they're blocked in learning. I'm quite the opposite. I'm just a sponge, you know.
Can I just explore that emotional intelligence, that EQ? You see a lot of people who are leading, but they quite frankly have very little EQ. Where do we go for our EQ? Is it something that comes from childhood?
I think, yeah, some people, again, women honestly tend to have, in the normal distribution, sit way over there in terms of EQ, but not everyone, and a lot of blokes have it as well. I think it is I mean, everything in life is nature and nurture, so people have a nature that either makes it easier or harder, but you can learn. But the only way you can learn EQ is if you sock it. That is, you've got to be willing to see what it is. Like if you and I are working and you come and say to me, Bruce, I'm sure you'd be more subtle than this. Actually, I'm not sure. You're a very direct sort of guy. No, I appreciate that about you. But you'd say, mate, I think you might have to think about EQ here, Bruce. And if I say, mate, BS, that's the end of it. Whereas I say, look, what do you mean? You know, and you say, go and read about it. EQ, yes, no shortage of material. And then do a course, try to understand yourself, your personality, how you inflict your personality on everything. And then you can grow, right? So you have to sock it, right?
And those people that you admire and respect, those leaders that you will have seen, do you watch those people very closely? Whether they're people who you might have read about, watched on television, seen standing up there in front of huge audiences. How do you sort of take their abilities and try and stick some of that on you?
Funny, you know, of the leaders that I admire, none of them have anything to do with standing up in front of huge audiences.
Right.
Let me pick an example. Sir Edmund Hillary, brilliant mountaineer, first guy up Mount Everest, brilliant guy, comes off the mountain, and unlike a lot of people who, you know, bless their hearts, write books, you know, and give lecture tours and stuff, he goes and sets up hospitals and schools for the Sherpa people in Nepal, and his family is still carrying that legacy on. And then when he's interviewed and they say, oh, you're such a wonderful guy, he said, oh, rubbish. He says, I'm no do-gooder, I just, you know, something needed doing, so I did it. That's my sort of hero, you know, and not someone who stands up there, someone that actually doesn't want to stand up there but just gets on and does it. So that's more my personality, I guess. So they're the heroes that I tune into.
So they influence maybe the way that you operate, or maybe they're influencing you because you're very similar as well.
Yeah, probably because I'm similar and I tune in and I say, I love that guy, you know.
Yeah. And do you study? I mean, do you study those leadership books, the ones that the Premier was criticising is for, you know, those American leadership books?
No, I don't.
No.
I don't. But I don't criticise them. But when I read these things, what I find is there are some generic rules to life which are applied to leadership, and they're applied to fathering or anything. So, for example, when I've written half a dozen books on fathering, and I've tried to write them quite differently, but in the writing of them, I've bought every book, obviously written on the subject. So I wrote, the second book was about daughters and their dads. Lots of women here, you'll understand why that's a really important thing. But there was nothing written about it. So I bought every book written about daughters and their dads and read them. But they all say the same thing. So I thought, make sure you don't say the same thing. But some of them are basic. Some of them are basic rules. So you're obviously going to say something the same. But leadership's pretty similar. Now they're kind of reminders all the time. You know, you do a course and they give you all this stuff about, you know, vision and leadership and integrity and, you know, da-da-da-da-da, and it's great. But then everything just fades because of sustainability, and then you go to another course and it sort of says much the same thing in a different way. The issue to me is sustaining. This is SOC again. It's the K of SOC, which is how do you change in a sustainable way? And so I like to read something once and then I write it in my phone and I say, mate, what are you going to do about this? So
give me an example.
Well, maybe not in leadership, but let's just say in marriage, right? Talking to a bunch of guys over coffee, guys say, how often do you affirm your wife? Everyone's looking around, you know. I think I did it once. So I say, to me, and they'll say, oh, bugger it, I should do it more often. Me, I'm going to write it in my phone. So every month on a Monday, I'm going to say, affirm your wife. Think of something that is to say positively. You know, I love the way you do that, or every week or something. So I'm
Does a little reminder come up on your phone? Think of a new one.
Absolutely, absolutely. Otherwise, honestly, it'll be 2 years later, and I'll be like the guy who does his New Year's resolution and thinks, what did I say last year?
Has she gotten on to the fact that every Tuesday at 10 o'clock it's Bruce's moment?
That's right. 9:59. She said should be coming.
We'll keep this quiet. We won't give this away. Let's explore this philanthropic side to what you do, because a lot of leaders now are looking for other things as well as having success in leadership, in their business, in their personal life. They're looking to explore other areas. Obviously, you have got so many different focuses. Why is the philanthropy side so important to a leader today, do you think?
Yeah, I have a slightly different view to some people, and I guess it comes from being a doctor. I mean, people say we should do philanthropy because it's an important part of our work. You know, we need to be seen to be doing philanthropy, good corporate citizens, etc. I know that is a mantra you hear around the place. I have a different view as a doctor, and you and I have discussed this before, I think, but when corporate leaders come into my office as a doctor, they are essentially naked. They are emotionally naked in my office, or maybe high-flying politicians or high-flying sports people. They are essentially naked in my office because that's the nature of a medical consultation. You come to see me, right? You know, I don't care who you are. You have fears and worries and an illness, and I ask about the kids, family, relationships, because that's part of being a doctor. And pretty soon you realise something, that people have hollow lives. And the analogy which I've used before, which I like it. If you don't like it, is that it looks like chocolate on the outside, but on the inside it's hollow. And that's actually my feeling when I talk to people. I think, bloody hell, your life is hollow. You have a hollow life. But some people, they sort of look the same on the outside, but inside they're like a caramello chocolate with a rich golden core. And philanthropy or community service is part of that. Of course, a good relationship with your partner, good relationships with your kids, and rich experiences, which we talked with some of the guys about earlier on. You know, looking after yourself, having close friends who really care about you and bother, and are there for you, but having some service is an important part of a caramello life. So it's essential, I think, to having a rich golden core to your life. It's not an addition to look good. In fact, I think if it looks good on your CV, it's probably bordering on hollow again, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to corporates. I was sitting in a car once with the guys, and we're talking about Arche actually, because I've volunteered. I do work in the third world, and especially after disasters. So I went up to Arche after the tsunami and went up there actually 5 times to work. And he said to me, "Oh, you're so lucky. You doctors and nurses can go and do these things. All we can do is write a check." And he felt the hollowness of that. You know, he actually wanted to get on a plane and do something. I said, "You can come, mate. Just carry buckets, help build houses, help run the operation." I mean, people like me, we're just out there working in villages. We don't even know where all this water's coming from and things. Yet, actually doing something is important part, I think, of a rich caramello life.
But there's rich and rich. There are lots of people who put lots into their life. but that doesn't necessarily give them that caramello chocolate experience that you were just talking about. You know, we sometimes think, well, we're busy, therefore we're succeeding, we're doing all that we can. How do you get that balance pretty right?
Well, I have an analytical, scientific view of it, but I think life has 6 components, and I'm always thinking about them. How am I doing? So, you know, we talked about my wife, affirmation, right? I think I've got a relationship with my wife. How emotionally invested am I in that? And if I start to drift away, then I think, come on, Bruce, pull yourself together, invest and nurture that relationship. We might go off on a naughty weekend, for example. No more details, thanks. My kids, you know, am I investing in my kids? Like 2 of my kids are married and one's about to get married, and I think, well, you know, am I doing things? And I might ring up one of them and say, you want to go out for dinner or have a coffee or whatever, you know, etc., etc. Am I fit? Am I having friends? You know, am I really being close to my friends? Am I letting that drift? So it's by acts of intention that I do that. And my career has helped me in this regard, because again, if you come to see me and you're dying, I've got to tell you, I mean, I do this all the time. I tell people they're dying. I actually run the course in the medical school about how to do this, because I have to do it a lot. It's one of the most poignant parts of being a doctor, as you can imagine. If you're sitting there with your loved one and I'm telling your loved one they're going to die. But if you're the same age as me and your kids are the same age as mine, I am absolutely going to feel that, even as the doctor. And I'm not going to go back to my office at Charlie Gardner's. I'm going straight home to play cricket with the boys and that sort of thing. So medicine has given me a daily reality check, which has helped me to shift a caramello life instead of this idea that I'm successful because of my work. Yeah. Work can only deliver a certain amount. Beyond that, it can't deliver.
We were talking earlier, whilst we were having our fruit this morning, we were talking about, whilst I was off doing a cycle this morning, you're sitting there thinking. And it's funny, because it sounds, again, bleeding obvious, thinking about things, but you give things thought. Maybe before the start of the day, I don't know, at the end of the day, whatever. We don't seem to find time for thinking. It sounds quite clear to us that you obviously do. You're looking at those 6 segments, and you're saying, hang on, that's not quite right, so I need to adjust that. Why is that thinking time, and how do you do that thinking time? Why is it such an important part of you?
I didn't used to be like that, I don't think. Much more driven, like get up early and get to work before the phone rings and charge ahead. Actually, about 25 years ago, I nearly killed myself with a circular saw. You've already had breakfast, so this is going to possibly put you off, but I was doing something in the backyard with a circular saw and essentially nearly cut both my legs off, just to summarise things, and nearly died. Just details don't matter. But I was 3 weeks in hospital, and it was an awful experience. I mean, an absolutely awful experience, and I had neuralgias and stuff. Anyway, I realised, mate, there's got to be a better way to live your life. So the first thing I did was to start thinking about what life would look like. I mean, here's the thing, and this is a leadership thing. I thought, mate, you could have died, right? Would you have been successful? You know, if the alarm had gone and that was it for you, right? So I think, how will I measure success in my life? When I look back at my life, what will be the measure of success? When I apply the ruler to it, and I thought, well, you know what, mate? It ain't going to be just work. So I think, what's it going to look like in terms of, have I been a successful husband, dad, friend, etc.? So then I started to think about it. Yeah, so now that's exactly what I do. And without wanting to bore you, I'll tell you exactly, you asked me. On Monday mornings, I think about my wife. And I am actually a man of faith, so I pray as well. I sort of pray and meditate, and that's when I think, you know, is it Tuesday at 10 o'clock I need to affirm her, or, you know, anything I should be doing maybe to help her. Then Tuesday's about my kids and now my little granddaughters. Wednesday's about myself, and, you know, am I really staying healthy, you know. Thursday's about my friends, you know, am I being a good friend and what can I do? So-and-so has got a few problems, I haven't contacted him. Friday's about work. Saturday is about the stuff I do in community service, which is really the Fathering Project, which is a huge thing in my mind, and the International Skills Institute, which I do as well. And Sunday I think about church and stuff like that.
So really,
and I spend 20 minutes, half an hour meditating and, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da.
It's a really interesting way of looking at life. I mean, many would say, gosh, that's so organised and so disciplined to do that. You do that every week.
Well, sometimes if someone invites me to come to Leadership WA breakfast, but I came in with my daughter actually. She works at Rio, so she said, "Oh, you want to have a coffee before?" And I said, "No, I'll actually just sit in the little park over there and meditate for 20 minutes before I come here." Yeah.
What does it do for you? What does that thinking time do?
It actually organises my day and prioritises my day. One of the things about leadership, and I'm sure you've heard this, but it's a big deal, I think, is when you climb the ladder of success, the issue isn't how far up the ladder you are, but against which wall is your ladder resting. And it helps me to get the wall right, Like I've made some big decisions in life which have been counter to what everyone wanted me to make. And the first one occurred when I was an intern and I was climbing the ladder of medical success, and I gave it up and went backpacking for 1.5 years. And that's a whole other story, but it's about finding out who you are in life and being authentic. It's that sort of hippie thing, But I'd grown up in one family and one medical school, which is like a cloister, and I pushed everything over and just went backpacking to find the meaning of life. Asia, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. Had a big effect on me. Everyone said I was a loony for doing it, And then I went to America to do a doctorate when everyone said, I was actually offered the most fantastic position as a doctor. Everyone told me you're a goose, but I said, I have to do this. And then there was another possibility recently that, everyone was telling me, or even all my friends, this is ideal for you, you could make a big impact. I said, it doesn't feel right for me. It's the wrong wall against which I want to rest my ladder. And of course, because I didn't do that, I've been able to do this fathering project, which I think, with all the things I do, is going to have the most powerful effect on Australia. I mean, I love my research, and it takes most of my time. But, if you can change fathers in Australia, it's the most powerful force out there to stop kids doing drugs and binge drinking and whacking people and loss of values and depression and attitude to school. So I know that is going to have much more effect as an act of meaning than all the research I do or the patients I see. So lead it up against the right wall and then start climbing. So that's what this does for me.
Which almost brings me to that point of leadership and people striving for these top positions, because generally speaking they come with the top pay. So in other words, money is the measurement of that success. It sounds to me like there is a lot to be learnt from someone like you who fills your bucket with all the other stuff, which might not necessarily be monetary, but it gives you far more satisfaction. How do we change that mentality so that kids coming up through university, going into jobs, recognise the other stuff as more important than perhaps the financial rewards?
I'm not sure, because funny you should mention it, because I teach medical students a lot and I try to get them to think about this, but I find medical students are pretty idealistic. They get sucked into money, like they all want to, when I talk about my work in the third world, they all want to come and join and volunteer. They'd love to get on a plane and roll their sleeves up. But then they start in private practice and they get sucked in. And, I was just thinking actually this morning about a colleague of mine. I saw him, it was mid-January, he was a surgeon, and I saw him, I said, "Oh, g'day, I thought you were down south with the family." He said, "Yeah, I was down there for a week or so, but I realised that every week I earn $10,000 operating, so if every week I spend down south with the family, it's costing me $10,000. And he's a great guy. He just got sucked in because he could earn money, he did. You know what I thought? I didn't say it, obviously. I felt so sad, and I thought, mate, take 3 weeks off, get liberated. But I'm not clever enough to see this myself, but I can tell you one incident as a medical student, I got sent to the Himalayas, didn't even want to go. Boy from Bassein, never been outside of WA. I'm up in the Himalayas in a poor hospital, there's 2 doctors there, one from America, one from England, brilliant doctors, well trained, wife, kids, working in this poor hospital. And I knew how much they could be earning at home. And the hospital's dirty, the patients are all filthy, dirty and smelly. They come in and I said, "Guys, I've got to say, I'm really impressed as a medical student because I know how much money you've given up, and how much income you've given up to do this work amongst the poor." And they looked at each other and said, "Oh, thanks, Bruce." And I said, and this is the thing, I said, "But at least you have the gratitude of the poor to make you feel better." And they looked at each other and they said to me, "It doesn't work like that, Bruce. In order for them to keep their dignity, and not to get charity, we charge them the equivalent of 2 cents a day to come to the hospital. And they think we've come here to make money out of them. You don't do this stuff for the gratitude of the poor. You do it because it's the right thing to do. 22 years of age affected me quite deeply. And, you know, various things, I guess, probably including my personal religious beliefs have kept me on track there, but I do find that students probably can feel a bit that way, but they get seduced by money. So I don't think it's when they're young you're going to influence them. I think you've got to keep talking to students. Well, for me, it's doctors, you know, trying to be an influence as they get older and say, mate, get a caramello life, because the other stuff will just fill you with hollowness. Is that it? That's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. I suppose the criticism would be it's easy to sort of have that outlook on life when you can, you know, pay all the bills.
Yeah. You know, I'm sympathetic to that too, but mostly, to be honest, I find that people have got enough money to have a pretty good life. In my books, I always interview people. I've interviewed like over 400 people now for my books, a total of 1,000 hours, and I've heard lots of brilliant things, but they're people who make lifestyle decisions to earn less money and end up with a rich caramello life because of it. I mean, and they say, you know, why do you need that? Why do you need this? Why do you need to live there? Why do you need to have so many bathrooms? Why do you need that? And I've got to say, as a doctor who deals, as I said, with dying patients, that's another reality check for me. I mean, what is going to be, if you apply the ruler of success to your life, what would it look like? And as a leadership thing, you know, again, you talk about leadership courses. We're going to do this as a leader, you know, vision, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da. I always think, as a leader, have you got your life in order? You know, they asked me to give a talk at in Canberra on fathering to the parliamentarians, and they had the Deputy Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, you know, all the sort of senior people. And I was thinking, oh, how can I influence these people to, you know, fund fathering programs? But I accidentally got a hint from someone, took a different tack, and I said to, you know, politicians, look, how's it going for you? Oh, you got to travel to come here. How's it going for you as dads? Oh, there's some women there. And how's it going for you as mums? The whole conversation was about them as leaders, as people. Get your own house in order as a leader, and you'll be a much better leader. So as a doctor, I see that. This is a hollow life again, and I focus when I talk to leaders on getting their house in order, their personal life, their personal exuberance. You know, inevitably, if you haven't got it in order, you'll be stale, you'll lose your creativity, you'll start to get sick, you'll be worried about this, or you'll just become a boring person or have boring ideas, you know. You need energy, and that comes from having a caramello life.
Let me ask you one more question before we let others have a go. You talk about always looking in and saying, have I achieved all I should have achieved? Have I been successful? Have I done all this, done all that? Are you still very much halfway along that journey, or would you be saying, you know, if, you know, tomorrow, heaven forbid, you were, you know, sent to hospital with, you know, any days to live, would you be satisfied with your lot, or are you still driven to do a whole heap more?
Oh yeah, I feel like I think if I was sitting in a doctor's surgery, and if you're the doctor and you say, mate, you got 2 weeks to live, I'd say, well, thanks, I've had a good innings. Time to put the bat under my arm, take the batting gloves off and head back to the pavilion. Had a pretty good innings, actually. Yeah.
So you're doing well, but you've still got lots more to give.
I've got lots more to give, but I'm not someone who feels like he's failed. If I haven't cured cancer, right, I'm not going to feel like I've failed. Because we made huge inroads, and we've got tests that are used around the world, and, you know, da-da-da-da-da, and we've trained students, and we've, you know, sequenced genes and do it, you know, we've pushed the field so far, and someone else will pick up on it. You know.
Bruce, we could carry on talking all morning, all week. It's always a pleasure. You've been inspirational to us this morning, and I've certainly learnt a lot, and I'm just trying to work out, it's Friday, I'm just trying to work out what I put in my Friday box. But
can I put in one plug before we finish?
Yeah, of course.
Well, no, just the plug, just the Fathering Project. I mean, if anyone's interested in getting involved and supporting it or helping, whatever, we need lots of people. There's lots of schools to get to and what have you. And the website is thefatheringproject.org. It's actually at University of Western Australia. We can just Google my name and fathering or whatever. It'll come up as the Fathering Project, and we'd love you to volunteer to help in some way or support us in some way. It's a very powerful project, so that's my little plug for the morning. Sorry, mate.
Plug away. Thank you, Bruce. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, James.